there's a slight possibility you could end up on camera for the rest of your life. But once I post this stuff on YouTube, I'm going to leave it there for my great-great-grandchildren to watch. Anyway, so I'm recording now. We're online, et cetera, and we're online, and I'm crossing my fingers. That's pretty unscientific, but I'm crossing my fingers and hoping things stay this way. So on Saturday, we had one of those, well, I'm assuming there's other people who had the same experience. I live in Midtown, and we had, where literally I thought it was almost a tornado. It ripped a Palo Verde tree out of the ground in the house right next to us and just ripped it up. I mean, it was amazing to me because I really, there were 3 Palo Verde trees in a row, and one of them, the one at the end, it just was lifted up out of the ground and, dropped. I mean, the wind here was fierce, and it destroyed a gazebo we had built outside. It had it damaged our internet stuff up on the roof. It created all kinds of issues and problems, and there's still a giant mess to clean up. I'm not sure whether anybody else experienced this, but we had no power for 2 hours, and my mom up north was had no power in her foothills apartment for 4 hours. So I don't know if did anybody else experience any of this kind of stuff on Saturday night because of that big storm? Nobody is what it sounds like. Well, you guys are pretty lucky. One of the most upsetting things to me was that it knocked out my internet, and then the internet kind of came back on, and it went off, and it went on, and it went off, and we still have issues with it, but it seems to be okay now. So all we can do is hope. Something I've said before, which was if we're proceeding in class and all of a sudden I just die and disappear, which I don't know if it's more likely today than any other day. They say that things are going to work, though not everything is working. But at least the computer in the studio is working. So anyway, if we are 95% done with class, meaning it's 5 o'clock, let's say, and we are covered a lot of material and we're pretty much done with class, and suddenly everything crashes, well then probably I'm not going to restart a class meeting if it's at 5 o'clock, right? But if it should happen, within an hour or even 2 hours from now, it's only 2:27, so 4:30, then I'm going to immediately, well, assuming I can get back online, that's the thing, I'm going to immediately try and send out another link just so we can get some closure, okay? But I'm pretty confident things are going to work okay, and these days, to be pretty confident about anything is pretty good as far as I'm concerned. Okay, so I have to admit that I am astonished that I did not get about 30 irate emails from students. And even at this moment, if I'm going to ask, let me just ask if there are any questions anybody wants to ask me. Because there's one issue that I would think people might be upset about or thinking about. So I'm happy to address any questions about it. There's 20 people out there, I know, and wow. All right, so here's the issue.
Well, I actually got a question.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Does it have to do with grades?
Okay, great.
Because I'm just waiting for my response or for what my grade was on my metrics lab.
Oh, okay. Well, that is not exactly the question I was asking, but the bottom line is I'm absolutely still kind of hand grading those metrics lab, and I haven't posted any of those yet. Okay, so that's me. I'm behind and posting stuff on between grading and posting on a D2L. I'm behind on that. I'm going to get caught up on it as best as I can, though. Okay. I think when it comes to these labs, especially that metric lab, you should assume that you did pretty well on it, because I'm going to be pretty flexible about the grading on that first lab that we did here. But actually, what I was expecting people to ask me about, to be honest with you, is quizzes, especially quiz 1, which, and I'll tell you why I was expecting everybody to ask me a question about it. When I went to start grading quiz 1 on D2L, now I've got quiz 1 in 2 different places, right? I've got it on email, and I've got it on D2L. And some of them I've graded on email, and I've sent people back a note that says, great work, okay? On D2L, which I've already admitted to you is sort of new territory to me, on D2L, I wanted to put the quiz 1 on D2L, and I asked colleagues for help. I did this, I did that. These days, you want to learn how to do something like that, you Google it, and you go to YouTube and you put it in. So anyway, I was kind of proud of myself because I put more, the key is more, oh, I know, I'll address that issue, okay? But anyway, so I put it on D2L, and I was, sort of proud of myself that I'd managed to figure out how to put it on D2L. And many people took the quiz on D2L, which was great. But when you're putting the quiz on D2L, this is something that it just didn't occur to me because I'm not very experienced. It asks you for an answer. So let's just say I had a question like, what is a micrometer? And I wrote, a micrometer is a unit of metric measurement equal to 1/1,000,000th of a meter. I wrote that in the answer because, that is a possible answer. I could have also written 0.000001 m, right? I could have written any of those, but it won't actually let you enter the question unless you put an answer in it. And I'm sure that there's some way to get around that, but believe me, I haven't figured it out. So that was fine. I thought, oh, fine, I'll put the answer. So I put what I thought was a very standard answer. Okay, then when I came back and I started grading those quizzes, I realized that they'd already been graded. That D2L had gone ahead and graded them for me based on the answers that I gave. And when I looked down the line, I saw that the probably average was about 3 out of 10, right? I thought, oh my gosh, what is going on here? 3 out of 10. And that's when I thought, uh-oh, I'm going to get a bunch of irate emails. People are going to go, Steve, I don't understand why I only got 1.5 points out of 10 on the quiz. Which I certainly would have thought about that too. I'd have thought, hey, why did I only get 1.5 points on a quiz? I know I did better than that. Well, that was D2L grade quiz. And I got to tell you this. If you don't answer the question exactly like I have written it at, and so if you don't answer it exactly that way, then it gives you a 0. I mean, look, if I said to you, a gram, I asked for the definition of a gram, and it said, a gram is the weight of 1 milliliter of liquid water. And if that's what I wrote as the answer, but you read the question and said, what is the definition of a gram? And you wrote the weight of 1 milliliter of liquid water, which is certainly good for full credit. A gram is a unit, you know what I mean? One word different, and it rejects it and gives you 0. So, needless to say, I've been going back and regrading all of those, which is exactly what I knew I would need to do. I didn't know that D2L would grade it and then probably post it. So maybe it is. Maybe it didn't post it. It just graded it. But I suspect it graded it and put it in the gradebook, and people were looking and going, oh, I got 1.5 points out of 10. Then I went back, manually graded it, of course. And when I manually graded it, I found myself giving considerably better grades. I would say the average when I manually graded things was more like 8 or 9 out of 10, which is kind of what I expected. So anyway, if you had a heart attack because you got your first quiz back and you got 1.5 out of 10, then you definitely want to go back now and look and see what's posted on D2L, because I suspect it has gone up dramatically. Okay.
So I didn't get a grade yet. Is that cool?
Well, so let me ask you, did you turn it on D2L? Did you send it to me by email?
The quiz?
Yes.
Sorry. Yeah. No. I turned it on D2L. It just didn't grade it.
You did. Yeah. Well, and that may just and
that's okay.
I will go back. Well, that's okay. Yeah, it doesn't mean that you got 0 on it. Would you do me a favor, though? I mean, this is about the only way I can make sure I stay on top of all this stuff. Would you just dash out a quick email to me that says, I turned my quiz in on D2L and I didn't get a grade. Okay.
Yeah,
and I'm going to go back and look, it presents you, when you do D2L, it presents you with a long list of everybody who turned in a quiz by D2L. And then you got to go down. Of course, it already graded it, which is crazy. Those grades aren't the real grades. I have to look at every document. So then it goes down and it grades it. And then I'm assuming it posted those very low grades. Okay, the grade books don't have it yet, huh? Okay, well, then that's great. Now, that's why I didn't get 50 irate emails. So the bottom line is that I appreciate that you just told me that, because there's obviously another step that I have not done. So it says you have to click on feedback to view the grade because the gradebook doesn't have it yet. Okay, let's see. I can't go look at the gradebook right now because I don't want to.
There's no feedback button though.
Oh, there isn't? I see.
No,
See, there's a button at the bottom of the page that says publish. And I figured, well, that's it. I was publishing the results. But look, all of this, I needed all this feedback. I had to have it. As soon as we can today, and I'm not going to go look at grades right now because there's Federal Education Privacy Act that I would be potentially in trouble if I was to display people's grades during this presentation. So I'm not going to take that chance. But I am going to go back as soon as we're done today, and I'm going to look at the grades that have been posted, and I'm going to click the button that will publish. I thought publishing, when it said publish, I was publishing it to the gradebook. I will get this stuff sorted out, okay? As far as I'm concerned, right now everybody has an A, but I will get this stuff published. I will get this figured out so that after the class today, you should be able to see your grades. I mean, and honestly, I am just, I am in the process of trying to process all these grades, mixing stuff that's come in on the internet and stuff that has come in on D2L. And I apologize that I'm behind on this. Believe me, I'm going to do my best to get us caught up on it as fast as possible, especially since I'm planning to post another quiz tomorrow. And then technically I have an exam this week. And that exam was technically scheduled for Wednesday and then going to be due on Friday. You know what? I apologize, people. I think I'm just going to push that exam back one day and post it on Thursday. And that is going to be in addition to the quiz that I plan to post that day. So I would leave your weekend open this weekend for working on biology stuff. Okay, and I will let you know about the exact plan with that stuff pretty soon. Meaning the worst case scenario is I'm just going to push that exam one back till Thursday. I'm not going to push it any farther than that. And it's partially because I need to figure out how to make things appear when they're posted and all that kind of stuff too. So, you know, for example, Zen, I saw your note and I know I've graded quiz and I told it to publish, but the fact that it's not showing up means that it is, well, that I haven't pushed the right button. I'm going to figure out how to push that button. And so that stuff should appear pretty soon. But, you know, Alva, can I address your question? Your question is the key has more questions on it than Then on D2L, well, guess what? I think I may have mentioned way back when that this is something I tend to do. When I post a key, I find myself inclined to, at the very end of the key, to post some of what I often refer to as bonus answers. And what they really are is they're often answers to thought questions that you've never seen the answers to before, but I'm posting them anyway. And I'll tell you exactly why I do it. I think it's a valuable experience for people to look at the quiz, to look at their answers and to look at the quiz, okay? And to study those answers a little bit. So what I'm trying to do is entice people to look at those quiz keys by promising them that at the end of every quiz key, there will be some bonus answers that will be very useful on upcoming quiz, okay? Upcoming quizzes. So that's why there was probably an additional 5 questions and answers posted at the bottom of the key that I posted for quiz number 1. And you know, I've got quiz number 2, the keys ready to be posted. I thought I had posted it, but I didn't. I will post it as soon as we are done with class today. So I think it says that on my agenda. So Alva, that's the answer to your question, which is why did it have more questions on that? And the answer is because that's just something I do. And look, if you don't want to look at the quiz keys, fine. I can't force you. I'm not going to come to your home. But I think it's worth looking at the quiz keys for study purposes. Remember, when I make up an exam, I use the quizzes. So when I make up this particular exam this week, I'm going to include information from quiz 1, quiz 2, quiz 3, and possibly even quiz 4. So it's worth looking back at those keys. And again, quiz number 2 is the keys done. I thought it was posted, but it's not. I'm going to figure out how to get that posted as soon as we're done in class today, okay? So I'm making myself my little set of no quiz 2 key to get sure that it is up and ready to go, okay? I'm also going to post the new version of the Characteristics of Life PowerPoint that I'm working on. I'm still going to work on that today. Important material on that I'd like to talk about today. And anyway, and I will post the updated version of that because it's not completely done, but it's pretty close to getting finished, but it's not completely done. I posted it last week as the Characteristics of Living Things .1. After today, I'm going to post it. It's going to be called the Characteristics of Living Things .2. And so you'll have a more up-to-date version of the PowerPoint that I'm going to show you and look at today. Okay? Well, you know what I should be doing? I should be looking at my agenda and hoping it's somewhat up to date, okay? Because here it is. I've got, this is today, day 7, July 13th. Thought questions X through AA plus GG through LL. Oh, I don't know if we'll get through all of those, but we will make a big dent into those for sure. Technically, the Alka-Seltzer lab is due today at 7 p.m., I think is what we decided. And if you can get the Alka-Seltzer lab turned into me, D2L, or on email, that would be great. The first 6 lectures are posted on YouTube. Characteristics of Life PowerPoint Part 2 we're going to work on today. We're going to start looking at that Basic Chemistry 1 PowerPoint. Then quiz number 3 is not posted yet, okay? Quiz number 3 posted tomorrow morning, right? So let's get it up. I'll get it up before class for sure. And then quiz 2 key, like I said, is going to be posted after class today. I apologize. I am a little overwhelmed by trying to deal with everything, and I didn't expect to have my entire day yesterday, or a good chunk of my day, trying to reconstruct parts of my house that was damaged on Saturday night. I mean, there were things that had to be fixed, otherwise they would have had bad consequences. So that's at least one of the reasons I'm behind. And I'm going to blame it on the darn monsoon, which I hate. I hate the monsoon. I mean, I know there are people who just love the monsoon. You watch the weather people and they're like, oh my gosh, the monsoon. As far as I'm concerned, the monsoon could just, I would be happy if we didn't have a monsoon, because it's this kind of crazy microburst and this kind of stuff that just makes me wish that we would go throughout the summer with no monsoon. Oh, I know people are going to hate me for that. I mean, believe me, my own wife, every time I say to her, I hope there's no monsoon this summer, she actually must think I'm in charge of weather, because she actually will tell me, don't say that. Don't say it, as if I was in charge of weather. Believe me, the way my luck runs, if I was to beg the weather gods not to have a monsoon, I assure you they would make the monsoon twice as long and twice as hard. But I don't have that kind of control over things. The bottom line is, though, is that storm yesterday, I got in trouble because as soon as it started pouring and ripping things to shreds, I said, well, there's your monsoon. You finally got it. You've been praying for it, and here it is, ripping the gazebo apart and tearing up all this other stuff. So anyway, okay, fine. I'm going to get off my monsoon soapbox. Sorry, it's just everybody I talk to loves the monsoon. And I guess I'm the 1 in a million who would just as soon it didn't come. Because I don't like humidity. I'm a desert rat. If it would stay 10% humidity the whole summer, I wouldn't care if it was 113 like it was like yesterday. If it was 10% humidity. But that's me. Okay. You didn't pay good money to listen to me rant and rail about the monsoon. No, you paid good money to hear me talk about the characteristics of life. And so that's where we're going to go. And I guess I'll start at the beginning just because I'm going to zoom through the beginning. And I'm zoom most characteristics of living things. We've only talked about 2 so far, my gosh. So I'll just zoom through most of this. Oh, I know you've watched this 20 times. I appreciate it. Because I can't imagine that anybody wouldn't watch this 20 times. I mean, my gosh, what a magnificent PowerPoint. Hey, you know what? I mean, this PowerPoint is kind of like the text chapter. I could ask you any question I wanted on this PowerPoint. I mean, the bottom line is I've told you there's 4 tissue types, right? Muscular, nervous, epithelial, and connective. And you may not know exactly what that means, but that wouldn't prevent me from asking a question like, list 2 of the 4 tissue types. It's not impossible. And what does this MANC stand for again? Muscular, epithelial, nervous, and connective. Muscular, epithelial, nervous, connective. I'm zooming. Sorry. I think we got to that. Then we went to livers, organ systems. Here's the 11 organ systems of the body. I just hear the weirdest thing behind me. Actually, I think this is a new slide where I've listed the 11 human organ systems, the integumentary system, the cardiovascular system, the reproductive system, the skeletal system, the endocrine system, the lymphatic system, the respiratory system, the muscular system, the nervous system, the urinary system, digestive system. You've heard about these for sure. These systems work together to form the multicellular organism like a human, a whale, a cat, a dog, a rabbit. Oh my gosh, there's millions of multicellular organisms. I mean, pretty much all the organisms people are really familiar with are multicellular organisms. And the question is, what about other multicellular organisms? And oh, I put that worm there, stole that off the internet. Because worms are multicellular creatures, and in a worm, you will find some version of these organ systems, probably simpler, because as we look at all the animals that form the population of the planet, we see that some are simpler than others. I mean, there are some very simple animals like sponges, and when you look in a sponge, you're really not going to find, even though it's multicellular, you're really not going to find well-developed organ systems like you do find in your cat, your dog, your blue whale, whatever. Okay, but other multicellular organisms have maybe simplified systems or slightly variable systems. They're still super important. But the real question is, what about unicellular organisms? And so here's an important factoid. Unicellular organisms, I'm talking about bacteria or protists, they do not have tissues or organs or organ systems. They are too simple to have those. Now, does that affect how they sit on the organization of living things? Yeah, it does. Right? I mean, unicellular organisms are simpler. They also are much smaller than multi-structures. Look at these numbers: 1 micrometer, 5 micrometers. I'm always thinking that a single bacterium, it's about 1 micrometer in length. Now, look, I got to back up for a second and show you a trick ruler, of course. I don't know which one is the best to show. I'm just going to jump out for a minute, okay, and shrink this down. So now I'm showing you this, and I know it's backwards. Oh, maybe I can use this one. This is the plastic one that I thought I could use it, and maybe it would work. Well, maybe it would work. Okay, look, take a look here between 16 and 17 right there, okay? And it actually should, does it appear right now, or is it backwards? Here it should be backwards, it is, and here it should appear right, I don't know. Anyway, but the bottom line is, when you look at these 2 centimeters, this 1 centimeter here between 15 and 16, it's divided, of course, into 10 micrometers. Now, those 10 micrometers, they're, you know, about that wide, right? I mean, I'm going to say they're about that wide. That's how wide a micrometer, give or take a few micrometers. Anyway, sorry. Oh, I said that wrong. I was saying that this is the width, this position, right, of a millimeter, okay? I mean, on this ruler, it's the tiniest little line there. Let's see how it'll look. That tiny gap between those 2 lines, that is a millimeter, okay? So here's where I was going with all this. A millimeter is 1,000 micrometers, right? 1,000th of a thousandth is a millionth. So what that means is that if you, well, you couldn't do it. If you could line up bacteria, you could fit 1,000 bacteria between the 2 lines on your metric ruler. 1,000 bacteria end to end would fit between those 2 lines, but good luck doing it because they're tiny and they're like cats. They don't like to be herded. You could not fit a single cat between those 2 millimeter lines, I assure you, okay? But you could fit 1,000 typical bacteria. That's how small bacteria are. When you look at bacteria in a microscope, about the maximum magnification you can really do well on microscopes is about 1,000 power, and even they look like little dots. So unicellular organisms are simple. They don't have tissues or organ systems. Once you're a unicellular organism, then you jump next into an ecological population. So this slide, just thought I would show you, it's got 3 different kinds of bacteria. Look at these numbers down here: 5 micrometers, 2 micrometers, 1 micrometer. You can see that these creatures here, which are actual bacteria, that their size is way, I mean, they're talking 5 micrometers here, but they're really showing you this spiral-shaped bacterium. In general, and I got to tell you, I'm no expert on bacteria, there's round bacteria they call coccus or coccus-shaped. There's there's rod-shaped bacteria, bacillus, and then there's the sort of weird spiral bacterium they call the spiral shape. So anyway, but I had to mention that because that's kind of an important bit of information between unicellular and multicellular creatures. Now, I should have included that bacteria are in the 1 to 5 micrometer range, but protists can be quite a bit larger than that, but still pretty darn small. Maybe if you had a really large protist, a big old paramecium, you might be able to see it swimming in a drop of pond water, but probably not. It's still pretty tiny. Maybe it'd be 100 micrometers long, which means you could fit 10 of them in between the two smallest lines, the tiniest gap on a metric ruler. So if you're a multicellular creature, you go from multicellular organism to tissues, organs, organ systems, right? And all of this stuff. But if you're a unicellular organism, nope, you don't have tissues or organ systems. You are a living thing that is fated to be a unicellular creature your entire life. Whether you're multicellular or whether you're unicellular, you then jump up to the next level in the organization of living things, which is the ecological population level. Hold on. Just in case anybody needs to be reminded, here, of course, is the vocabulary list. Matter, atom, molecule, organelle, cell, tissue, organ system, organism, could be multicellular use. And now we jump to ecological population, ecological community, ecosystem, biosphere, and then I've put the cosmosphere in there too, because ultimately the biosphere of the planet Earth is completely dependent upon light from the sun. Okay? You can't have light from without light from the sun. You are doomed. I mean, the biosphere of the planet, will not work. So, just to show you the bacteria and to realize I should have said something about protists, and I didn't. I'm creating a bunch of brand new PowerPoints because I don't like the ones I will event. All right, next couple, 2 or 3 levels, just zoom through these. The next group up is an ecological population, a group of interbreeding individuals, all the same species, like human, cactus, javelina, round-tailed ground squirrel, roadrunner. I mean, think about all the different creatures that are outside your door. Lizards and snakes and scorpions and tarantulas and Gila monsters and bobcats and mountain lions. I mean, every one of those types of organisms. Its next level up is in the form of an ecological population. And ecological populations are always made of just one species. Like I said the other day, humans cover the entire globe. Their ecological population is as big as the entire globe. So our cactus, though, their ecological population is about half the size of the state of Arizona. It's pretty much limited to the lower half of the state of Arizona. Might bleed a little across the border, but not much. Now, javelinas, their ecological population is quite a bit bigger, extends, into New Mexico, etc., and Texas, and all these kind of places. So it's a little bit bigger. Round-tailed ground squirrels, my gosh, those are those little things that look kind of like prairie dogs that you see running around. They look like a little round brown squirrel, and that's what they're called. And other things like roadrunners. And again, you start to think about how many different creatures out there are forming an ecological population. Well, remember, in order for a species to persist, meaning to continue living from one day to the next, one generation to the next, one year to the next, one century to the next, it has to participate in what goes on in an ecological population. At the very least, it has to be involved in the production of offspring. And only creatures in the same species can form fertile offspring. Okay. Next group up is the ecological community. Ecological community is an interconnected group of ecological populations. So here's where the humans, the saguaro cactus and javelina and all those start to overlap, okay, and form a bigger level. When I think of ecological communities, I have to tell you that I mostly think of what are called food webs, kind of lists of or diagrams of who eats who. And because it's in a food web where you see things like producers, like plants, like a saguaro cactus is a producer. It's a kind of plant that produces plant parts and nutrients for animals and all those kinds of things. I mean, the saguaro cacti around here are mostly past blooming, but when they were blooming, they were producing these beautiful fruits packed full of very rich protein seeds and many, many creatures, ants, ground squirrels, javelinas, humans, all different kinds of birds would all find connected to saguaro cactus that way. So that's not the only thing that's happening in the ecological community, food webs I mean, but it is an important part of ecological communities. So when I think about ecological communities around here, I think of things like the community we live in, the Sonoran Desert Foothills Ecological Community. When you drive up Mount Lemmon, you go into the Desert Sky Island Ecological Community, or you go through the Desert Riparian Community, Desert Flatland Communities, Lower Sonoran Grassland, Upper Sonoran Grassland, Open Oak Woodland. I mean, there's all kinds of ecological communities that are pretty much right outside my door. I think when I look outside my door, I mean, it's pretty urban at Speedway and Alvernon. But as you move north, you go and you see the Sonoran Desert Foothills Community. I mean, you know what the poster child for the Sonoran Desert Foothills Community is. The poster child is a saguaro cactus. Saguaro cactus is the poster child of this particular community. And I mean, we are not there now, but when I used to sit on West Campus, I would point west from West Campus and I would talk about the gigantic saguaro forest that is out there. I mean, if you're on Gates Pass and you're looking out at that area there, you are seeing a saguaro forest. And you may think, well, you know, I've seen a forest before and it doesn't look exactly like that. Well, I would say, okay, that's fine. But the bottom line is that that's a saguaro forest. If you have a lot of water and the right soil conditions, you can pack trees really tightly together and form a forest like the kind of forest you see up on Mount Lemmon. But if there's not as much water and there's not as much resources, then organisms need to be spread around more. And that's what we're seeing when you look at Gates Pass. You're looking at a saguaro forest. And let me tell you, people spend lots of money, maybe not now, but they've spent lots of money to fly to Tucson, you know, and rent a car and drive to Gates Pass so they can see a saguaro forest because it's so unique and so interesting. So the ecological population of saguaro cactus out there is, of course, forming part of the ecological community. And because there's lots of things that feed on saguaros, and there are things that live in saguaros, and so the saguaros are an essential part of an ecological community. So we're still, by the way, just to notice, we're still talking about number one. We're about to be done with it because the next level up is ecosystem. An ecosystem is a collection of interconnected ecological communities. These communities are connected together by energy flow and nutrient cycling, meaning some abiotic things tend to hook ecosystems together. Energy flow, nutrient cycling. You know, I noticed this date I thought was interesting. The Encyclopedia of Global Warming and Climate Change, Volume 1, identifies 8 major ecosystems: temperate forest, tropical rainforest, desert, grassland, tundra. But they've really lumped them together to identify 8 major ecosystems. Some other sources are more careful, and they've identified maybe hundreds of different ecosystems on the planet. The number was 431 different ecosystems. That seems like a lot to me, but
Question for you.
Yeah, Ed.
So I'm not sure. Have you seen the whole thing that they did on Pablo Escobar and the hippos, and that he did in South America? How it's messing up the ecosystem there?
Oh, how he tried to create an ecosystem there?
No, Pablo Escobar liked hippos, so he brought hippos in from Africa to Colombia.
Right.
He's messing with the ecosystem there because there's nothing there that can kill the animal. Now it's technically like I guess it would be the top 1 predator. So it's like destroying.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I understand what you're saying. Well, I don't know much about Pablo. I don't know anything about Pablo Escobar and his hippos. But what you're saying is he was in one ecosystem, right? In one ecological community, one ecosystem. He brought a completely different animal into there. And I mean, humans have done this many times before. They've brought rabbits into Australia to eat the grass, and then the rabbits just completely overran everything because we didn't have any predators. So, I mean, what we're really talking about there is when we're not looking at a natural ecosystem and what it looks like and how it's put together, but when human decides, hey, I'm just going to plunk a new species in there and see what happens, or see if it survives, see if it can thrive under the conditions. And there's actually a term for that in ecology. They call it either invasive species or introduced species. And it is a big topic in modern ecology because often when people bring these species that are not historically found in an ecosystem, they dump them in, then there's lots of different things that can happen, including that they simply can't take it and they all die off, or they do very poorly, or they somehow do really well because maybe they have no natural predators, which is kind of what I think you were saying, huh, Kendall?
Yes, because the leopards and stuff there have not yet figured out how, the cavemen yet have not figured out yet how to kill the hippos yet.
Right. Those hippos, they're hard to kill. I've never had to encounter a hippo here, but I know what you're saying. So it's just we can sort of play mental and games. I mean, I'm guessing he had a lot of extra money to deal with, and he liked hippos, and so someone one of those hippo Christmas, and then he started eating it. So next level up for ecosystems, we're getting huge. I mean, are huge. So now we're at the biosphere. All the interconnected ecosystems of the planet, the 10th layer of life that covers the entire planet. I say 10 miles thick because there are living things that can fly 5 miles high above the Himalayas. And then there are ocean trenches that are 5 miles deep, and they're looking and they are finding living things in them. But the bottom line is, that's why I said about 10-mile thick layer of life. This is the layer of life that covers the entire planet. It's the last level in the organization of living things. I mean, look, living things are very highly organized. When you look at the way living things are organized on the planet Earth, you realize that is some really complicated organization. I mean, atoms, molecules, organelles, cells, tissues, organs, organ systems, multicellular organisms, ecological populations, ecological communities, ecosystems, the biosphere. I'm going to say it again. I challenge anybody to tell me anything in the universe that is as complex and organized as living things, because I When you look at this organizational scheme and you realize that you could spend an entire semester on any one of these levels, you realize how incredibly organized life is. Now, from number one, what we did, if you remember, is we actually jumped from number one. Wow, I jumped way too fast. We jumped from number one at one point all the way to, or maybe I moved that already. We moved all the way to number 6, right? Because we were sort of done talking about the biosphere. We went to number 6 here, all living things. I'm not going to go through this. We did already the 3 I's. We talked about biogeochemical cycles. We talked about the calcium cycle, etc. So before I leave here, I want to stop for a second to ask if anybody has any questions about it, about this organization of life, how things are organized. For what it's worth, the organization of living things is a very important concept in Bio 156 because we need to talk about atoms, molecules, cells, tissues, and to a certain degree, organs. I mean, this is the realm of Bio 156. And so I did spend way too much time looking at this, okay? All right, so I'm not going to waste any of our time here. I'm going to go straight to characteristic of life number 2. You know, and I'm just shrinking this for a second so I can see nobody's done any chatting that I know. Look, as I've always said, please, 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 if you have a question of any kind, just jump on in and ask. I know what I'm like. I can be hard to get a word in edgewise for me. Now, this slide is absolutely going to make me hungry. There's no doubt about it. So number 2 says this: all living things must acquire specific materials, that's atoms and molecules, and energy to maintain their organization. And so normally if I was in class, I would have drawn this picture on the overhead probably, but instead I actually found a really nice picture of what I think is one of the pinnacles of culinary excellence. I mean, look, a cheeseburger is really one of the best foods ever created. Of course, that's my opinion. I mean, I like cheeseburgers so much that I think that when I'm on death row someday and they come and they ask me, look, Steve, what do you want for your final meal? I'm going to say, I want a Diet Coke, of course. I want cheeseburger and fries. That's what I want as my final meal. Keep your lobster roll or whatever. I want a cheeseburger and fries. So when I start to think about food, I think about a cheeseburger. And this is certainly a wonderful picture of a cheeseburger that I stole off somewhere. They've even got the little sesame seeds on the bun. Oh, this is making me hungry, no doubt about it. So why did I put a cheeseburger here? Why? Because despite how technical this sounds, all living things must acquire specific materials and atoms and energy to maintain their organization. Number 2, really, it answers a question, a very basic question. Why do we eat stuff? I mean, why do all organisms, there's no organism that does not spend a certain amount of its life finding food and eating it? And the answer is right here. It's because all living things must acquire specific materials, that is atoms and molecules and energy, to maintain their organization. They have to. So I'm just going to kind of focus for a minute on the left side, because there's 2 reasons why we eat. 2 reasons. One is that we need energy. And the reason is we need replacement atoms and molecules. We need energy, we need replacement atoms and molecules. Those are the 2 reasons why we eat stuff. So if you ever wondered, why do we eat stuff? I've just told you the answer. We eat stuff because we need energy molecules and we need to replace atoms and molecules. Why do we need energy molecules? Because our bodies are machines that run on energy. When our dad's sperm fertilized our mom's egg, we instantly became addicted to energy. We cannot live without energy. We must have energy. We're not like a plant that can photosynthesize to get energy. I mean, we have to acquire energy in the food we eat. Now, even plants, some part of the plant can do photosynthesis and make its own glucose. But then it has to pass that glucose down to parts of the plant that can't do that. I mean, roots can't do photosynthesis, they're underground. So energy molecules are going to have to be sent down under the ground to those roots to keep those cells alive. Anyway, so this cheeseburger to me, it represents one of my favorite foods, and it represents the concept of all living things must acquire specific materials, that is atoms and molecules and energy to maintain your organization. Now, here's the thing. What makes us hungry? I mean, what exactly makes us feel like we are hungry? Well, I'm not talking about, the kind of hunger you have when it's, you're working and you look at your watch and go, it's 12 noon, I better eat my lunch because that's when I get my break. No, I'm talking about how you feel when you are really hungry. You're starving. I mean, I've been so hungry that I feel like I could smell some French fries about a mile away. My senses were alert because I was starving. Well, when I am actually starving and I cannot, I'm just hungry. My gut is clenching, etc. It has to do with energy. It is mostly driven by energy because low energy levels, a low fuel tank of energy in a cell, it triggers feelings and events and actions. And so when you are really, really hungry, it is because certain fuel molecules, like this is the most famous fuel molecule, really. It's a molecule called glucose, and its molecular formula C6H12O6. That means that this single glucose molecule has 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens, 6 oxygens. In this molecule, you're going to find 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens, and 6 oxygens to make a complete molecule, okay? And we have portions of our brain that actually, portions of our body, sorry, I shouldn't say our brain, though I'm not saying it couldn't be in our brain, but we have organs in our body that are constantly monitoring the levels of glucose in our blood. Some of those cells are in the pancreas. And so what I'd like to do is just real quickly, I'm going to go over here to the chat line, and I'm going to write a couple things. All right. Here's the thing. There's a type of cell in the pancreas. Detects low blood glucose levels and releases a hormone. The cell in the pancreas detects low blood glucose levels and releases a hormone called glucagon. Makes us hungry and communicates with most cells in the body ask them to release glucose if it's possible. Misspelled. So here it's yelling at me. Okay, I'm going to post it. So, glucagon makes us hungry and communicates with most cells in the body to ask them to release glucose. It literally says, look, if you've got some extra glucose, please release it, because the blood sugar level is dropping so low that it's starting to threaten the whole body. At the same time, glucagon will affect our brain and make us hungry. So we'll start thinking, I am starving, I need to eat something, so I'm going to try and find some food. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at all if glucagon was released into my blood, if it didn't it didn't affect my sense organs so I could smell a cheeseburger a mile away if I was starving, right? I mean, when I'm full, I feel like food, I barely can pay attention to it. But if I'm really starving, then the smell of a cheeseburger or French fries or something that can be even at the other end of the mall, I could smell it because I'm being triggered. I need energy. Now, what's also interesting is there is a type of cell in the pancreas that detects high blood sugar and this is something that will happen after you eat, and releases a hormone you've heard of. It releases a hormone called insulin. You've heard of it. I mean, how could you watch TV and not hear about insulin every night? There's commercial after commercial about blood sugar control and all that. So there's a cell in the pancreas that detects high blood glucose levels and releases a hormone called insulin. Now, this is what's going to be released after you've eaten, and all of a sudden there's a lot of glucose in your body and it floods into your blood, and now there's way too much glucose in your blood. It needs to be removed. So insulin, and among other things, make us feel full, okay? And it communicates with every cell of the body it tells them a different message. It says, to absorb glucose out of the bloodstream and lower. Absorb means to take in or pick up, right? Like when you use a paper towel to absorb water, you're using the paper towel to pick up that water. Okay? So insulin, sorry, I need to post this. Insulin can be part of what makes us feel full, and it communicates with every cell in the body and asks them to absorb glucose. So if your blood sugar starts to drop, your body, the cells in your pancreas will detect that. They'll release glucagon, and they will do things to make it go back up again. If it's going way above the normal level, those cells in the pancreas that affect it will release insulin and lower the blood sugar back down. I mean, this is an interesting idea. I mean, this is related to what we call homeostasis. All right, and homeostasis is the process in the body, and there's actually a definition that
Is
maintain
just works.
Go
I was
ahead.
just saying, isn't it when the body works itself to keep itself in balance?
That's absolutely one great way to put it. When I talk about homeostasis, I am talking about a pretty complicated biological process that's its job, and this is a body-wide thing. Its job is to maintain normal levels of, I'm going to say dozens of different substances or conditions. And what I mean by substances is that your body has to maintain sodium homeostasis, right? The right levels of sodium, because you don't want to have too much sodium, but you need to have a certain amount of sodium. It also helps you regulate things like body temperature, which is a substance. It's body temperature. So this process, homeostasis, it's linked to this idea that in the pancreas, if blood glucose levels drop too low, a hormone is released that tries to drive them back up towards the normal level. If they are too high, then a different cell detects that and releases a different chemical that drives them down, called insulin. Okay. And insulin is about bringing blood sugar back down. If there's this kind of level, what we would refer to as the homeostasis level, we get this right, homeostasis level of glucose equals 100 milligrams per deciliter. There's some great metric stuff for you, right? The basis level of glucose is about 100 milligrams per deciliter. So, I mean, there's a really great metric unit right there. 100 milligrams per deciliter. That's the level we want to maintain, give or take a little. I mean, I don't know. Last time I said to my doctor, 100 milligrams per deciliter, he said, well, I'd rather it was 90 milligrams per deciliter. Okay, but we're talking about roughly, 90. I mean, believe me, if mine was 100 milligrams per deciliter, my glucose level, my doctor would be thrilled with that. I have diabetes. It's pretty much controlled by medicine and exercise and that kind of stuff. And I cut it off.
Quick question.
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, what is the cell called that the cell in the pancreas that detects the blood pressure?
Oh, that detects the glucose level?
Yeah,
Well,
that's what I meant. Sorry, not blood pressure.
Okay, well, look, because I don't want to misspeak, there's two cells. There's alpha cells, there's beta cells, but let's just, I want to make sure I don't make a mistake, okay? Here it is. Oh, yeah, okay, well, I already can tell, right? So it instantly said, three major sites, alpha cells.
Okay, so alpha cells produce the glucogen, beta cells produce the insulin. Excellent.
Exactly, and I mean, honestly, thank you so much, Google. I mean, this is information that I knew, I just didn't want to get it backwards. It's been a while since we thought too much about that. But where am I down here? Okay, but there we go. Alpha cells, A cells secrete the hormone glucagon. Now these two cells could be side by side. That's what's kind of amazing. They could be sitting side by side, but these are cells designed to sense glucose levels and maintain that. They do that by what's called a negative feedback loop. Just for the record, a negative feedback loop is a homeostasis type loop that it kind of starts when something moves away from homeostasis, and the entire job of the feedback loop is back. the level toward homeostasis. Whatever that homeostasis, whatever that level is. So a negative feedback loop is a kind of physiological loop that brings the levels back toward homeostasis. So blood sugar goes up, the the beta cell makes insulin, and that tries to bring it back down. It goes way down, and the alpha cell makes glucagon, which tries to bring it back up. We're going to talk more about this in the not too distant future about homeostasis and all that, but that's what's really happening here. And it's an important idea that there's all of these different things in the body that have to be regulated. And I've gotten a tiny bit off track, but that's common for me. Point is that we were talking about glucose, right? We were talking about how, thank you for telling me I'm presenting to everybody, how when we are hungry, when we're starving, the reason isn't because we need to replace some atoms and molecules. The reason is because we are low on energy, and getting really low on energy is dangerous. I mean, you can die from having too low energy. I told you I was a diabetic, but I take diabetic medicines. If I don't eat right, the diabetic medicines can make my blood sugar very low. And when I have low blood sugar, okay, I can absolutely feel wiped out. That when you have really low blood sugar, this is what's called, oops, I better spell it right, hypoglycemia equals low blood sugar. Really, when I say blood sugar, I should say glucose, right? I mean, glucose. I should go back on this PowerPoint, which I have yet to post, right? And I should right here. At the common name for glucose is blood sugar. And I am going to make that smaller. I'm actually so the common name for for glucose, the common name in our body, it is referred to as blood sugar. And that's, of course, what we've been talking about, is this level up. So low blood sugar is called hypoglycemia. And so really, I could say that number is usually less than, I don't know, let's just say less than 80 milligrams per deciliter. Did I write that correctly before? Well, I wrote it correctly this time, okay? Hypoglycemia, low blood sugar, less than 80 milligrams per deciliter. I've got low blood sugar sometimes, and I feel like I'm about to run out of gas. I feel like I've hit this wall. I feel like I need to sit down. I'm tired. I feel weak. I feel disoriented. I feel dizzy. I'm trying to compare this to what happens when you are driving your car and you are running on fumes. And in my case, one of my cars beeping, going beep, beep, beep to me. You have 85 molecules of gasoline left. You better find some gas or we are going to be dead. I mean, the car will die. So can I just look? Can we just look at this word for a minute? The word is hypoglycemia. There are some word roots here that are worth knowing. Hypo means less than / below. Whoops. Glyce means glucose. And emia, well, most people might know what emia means because they've heard of anemia. Anemia equals, emia means blood. Oh, hypoglycemia. Emia means blood, glyce means sugar, and hypo means low or less than, below normal, something like that.
So then
Now-
would hyperglycemia mean like too high of the blood glucose?
Exactly. Hyperglycemia is the opposite. And it means really, I mean, hyperglycemia, as you can guess, remember, hyper equals more. All right. So hyper, oops, hyper, what am I doing? I just screwed something up. Backspace, hyper equals more or greater. You know, can be used in either case, all right? So equals more or greater. So hyperglycemia means that you probably have a blood sugar well above 100 milligrams per deciliter, the normal homeostasis value. Hyperglycemia, as you can analyze the word. Emia means blood, glyce means blood sugar, glucose, and hyper means above or greater than. So, you know, here's the thing. When I think about hyperglycemia, copy this so I don't have to write it again, and that means misspell it again. So hyperglycemia, it could mean greater than, you know, 100 milligrams per deciliter, up to, you know, 400, not 4,000, I think you'd be dead then, 400 milligrams per deciliter. Now, here's the thing, is everybody has hyperglycemia after they eat a meal. Because if you're cruising along, you're at 100, and you just decide, I'm going to eat, I don't know, a cheeseburger and fries, your blood sugar is going to go up like crazy. Totally logical, right? I mean, remember, that's one of the reasons you ate to increase your blood sugar level if you were really hungry. Now, if you eat and your blood sugar level is normal, you know, what will happen is your those cells in your pancreas, those beta cells, they will secrete a bunch of insulin that goes to every cell of the body and says to those cells, take up glucose, please, absorb glucose. And one of the cells that will be most affected by that could be liver cells. And those liver cells will start taking up glucose, and they will start forming a different molecule with them, a storage molecule called glycogen. And that storage molecule will just sit into your liver until later in the day, your blood sugar starts to go down, and then your liver will break that glycogen down and release glucose. I mean, the system is designed to maintain blood sugar at the exact right level for the normal functioning of most cells in the body. You know, the energy issue for cells is huge. I mean, for what it's worth, we're going to go back to energy. But look, if you have a heart attack and you die, or let's just say you just have a heart attack, that is an energy issue, okay? It's an energy issue, and I explain exactly what I mean. In your heart, there are tubes like this. Blood goes in the tube, it goes through the tube, and it goes to cells, right? That blood will bring glucose to cells in the heart, which they need. The heart cells are some of the hardest working cells in the body. Just think about it. They have to contract in like 0.9 seconds and relax. They have to contract 70 times a minute. Every minute of your life, they have to contract and relax 70 times. So they're really doing their whole thing, contracting, relaxing in about 0.9 seconds. Then they have a constant need for glucose. They also have a constant need for oxygen and they have a constant need for the removal of carbon dioxide. Well, all of that happens thanks to this tube. You know, it's a tube like an arteriole that exists in the muscle of your heart, and it carries all that stuff to, here's the cell out here. Well, heart attack, generally what happens is that tube gets blocked. When that tube is blocked, then blood stops going to this cell out here, and that cell rapidly runs out of oxygen and energy. And when it runs out of oxygen and energy, it dies. And when a bunch of cells in an area of the heart die, the heart usually reacts by going into a bunch of irregular spasms that don't move blood the way it's supposed to. And that means you don't get blood in your brain, you don't get blood in your liver, you don't get blood in your kidneys, you don't get blood in your eyeballs. And that lack of blood there is what causes organ failure that follows a heart attack. But let me just remind you, it's because the heart cell has run out of glucose and it's run out of oxygen, and it has a serious energy problem, and that will cause its death. All right, so the thing is having hypoglycemia, low blood sugar, is pretty bad because it threatens the health and integrity of cells all over the body in a very immediate way. If you have hyperglycemia, or what they like to say when they talk about diabetes, that's diabetes. Let's call this type 2 diabetes, adults. Okay. It is also referred as chronic hyperglycemia. And chronically, meaning constant, chronically high levels of glucose can damage heart cells, brain cells, eye cells, misspelled eye. Well, type 2 diabetes is sometimes called chronic hyperglycemia because you have trouble bringing the blood sugar level down to homeostasis, and so you're kind of constantly running on a higher level of blood sugar than is healthy and homeostasis levels. So the bottom line is that how did I get into all of this? I know. I was talking about energy. Okay, I was talking about energy. Slideshow. Give me back the slideshow. This is a perfect opportunity for me to talk about one of the most famous fuel molecules of all. Now, look, we're going to come back to replacement atoms and molecules in a minute, but I want to continue talking about glucose and energy and machines. But I don't know about you. I need to get up, stretch, walk around a little bit. And so we are going to take a 10-minute break now. Okay. I mean, we got started late today. We're not going to go late today, right? That would be too late, but we're going to get as much done as we can during this time period. And so right now we're on a 10-minute break. Okay. Okay. I'm sure everybody is happy with that. I'll be right back. Hey, everybody. (107 degrees out of my house, at least. One of my cats was assisting, and I was telling him, look, it's 107 degrees out. We simply can't sit on the porch and get pets when it is 107 degrees out. Oops, sorry, here we were. All right, so all living things must acquire specific materials, atoms, and molecules and energy to maintain their organization. We're still talking about energy here. Again, I'm going to say it, please, if you have a, just jump on in, because I can't, right now when the slide shows up like this, I can't see anything but the slideshow. I cannot see anything but the slideshow. So you could chat at me now, a chat that I really want to see, but I'm not going to be able to see it because because this, when I run the slideshow, it completely covers my computer screen. I cannot see anything else. Now, I think you can probably see me, but I can't see anything else but this. So we're still talking about energy. And so the first statement here, organisms are machines that run on energy. I mean, it's a little humbling to realize this, but it's true. Organisms like us, we are at one level a machine that runs on energy. I mean, all the amazing things biological creatures do, we could not do without energy. So where do they get that energy? They get that energy, and by the way, I like to, I like to abbreviate energy as a capital E. You'll see me using that abbreviation. So here we go. They get that energy from fuel molecules, mainly glucose. Now, I'm not saying there aren't other molecules that are commonly used to get energy out of in the body. I am not saying that, but look, this is complicated stuff. So let's focus in on the molecule that most cells use for energy. What they have to do is take that big old glucose molecule, which is just packed full of energy, and they have to carefully tear it apart, extract the energy, and transfer as much of that energy as they can to a molecule called ATP. Now, ATP is one of those molecules that is so darn famous that you just have, all you need to do is say ATP, and biologists globally will understand what you mean. What ATP stands for is adenosine triphosphate. And oh, believe me, we're going to talk about adenosine triphosphate, absolutely. It's the energy molecule that powers most cellular machines. Most cell machines, I mean, honestly, I can only think of one machine in the cell that does not run on ATP. And that machine, and so all the kinds of cell machineries, just about 99% of cellular machines, things that make the cell work and function, actually run on ATP. ATP is created by breaking glucose molecules down and transferring the energy from those glucose molecules over to this adenosine triphosphate, which you don't need to know that ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. You do not. All you need to know is that ATP is an energy carrier molecule that powers most cells in the body. Most cellular machinery runs on ATPs. Now, when I think about glucose, I cannot help but think about this structure. This is the basic 6-carbon glucose backbone, like it says here. Okay, so here's a carbon. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This molecule is going to be built around this 6-carbon chain if you're going to form glucose. Now, what I'm showing here, for what it's worth, is carbon. The capital C, of course, stands for carbon. But what are these other lines that I've carefully placed around it? These are covalent bonds. A covalent bond is one of the types of chemical bonds we need to know about, and it connects carbons to carbons, for example. Oh, lots of elements can get involved in bonding with covalent bonds. But the reason I'm showing you this covalent backbone, 6 carbons with all these lines, this carbon, you'll learn this soon, carbon likes to form 1, 2, 3, 4 bonds. Carbon, 1, 2, 3, 4 bonds. 1, 2, 3, 4 bonds. Carbon, as an element, it absolutely is found forming 4 covalent bonds just about any time you find carbon. And certainly when you find carbon like this in a physiological sense, not some bizarre, crystalline matrix of carbon, but just physiological sense, then you're talking about carbons bonded to other carbons and other elements like hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, carbon. Excuse me, other carbons, certainly. And this thing is what I like to call the 6-carbon glucose backbone. It's the skeleton. And one of the reasons why it took so long to draw this here, believe me, this was complicated. There's probably some better, more efficient way to draw molecules like this, but I don't know it. So it's important to understand that the energy that I'm talking about is stored here in these covalent bonds. Now, a covalent bond, a line like this, it represents an electron, a pair of shared electrons. This is a pair of shared electrons right here. Pair of shared electrons, pair of shared electrons, pair of shared electrons, pair of shared electrons. Every one of these lines that's between 2 carbons, it represents a pair of shared electrons. 1 electron from this carbon and 1 electron from this carbon to form a pair of shared electrons. Covalent bonds are often called electron sharing bonds because they do, in fact, represent a bond that's formed when 2 carbons share electrons. This carbon is saying, hey, I've got an electron to share, this carbon saying, I've got an electron to share. Let's form an electron sharing bond or a covalent bond. All right, so that's bonding, covalent bonding. You've read a little bit about this already, I'm sure. But what I'm going to saying right now is that where is that energy that's in this covalent bond? Where is the energy stored in this molecule? And the answer is it's mostly stored in these covalent bonds between carbons. That's where it's mostly stored. Now, energy can shift around inside of a molecule, but mostly it's stored there between those bonds. Now, honestly, most molecules have energy stored in them. And if you have the right machinery, you might be able to extract that energy from them. But the bottom line is that we're talking about glucose today, blood sugar, and we're talking about this idea that we have to eat food because one of the things we need is molecules, fuel molecules that have energy stored within them. So really, I kind of almost want to ask this question. I'm going to go back. Sorry, I don't know how I keep doing that. I almost want to ask this question, where? This is going to mess everything up. But no. Trying to avoid that. Because this is a pretty significant question, really. And the question is, when we look at a molecule like glucose, where did the energy come from? Where did this energy in glucose come from? And I'll tell you straightforwardly, it came from photosynthesis. It came from plants doing photosynthesis and taking solar energy and storing it inside these bonds. So maybe, to be honest with you, I think I should put that here. It was originally solar energy. Hey, didn't screw anything up yet. The answer is, it came from solar energy. Plants, most plants make a lot of glucose. So, anyway, sorry, let me go to my slideshow. Does anybody have any questions on this particular slide? There's a lot of material here. And I mean, you know, I'm obviously going to present it to you as if it was a textbook and ask you to memorize it. And if there's anything I could say that would help you understand it better, I would be so happy to try. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, this is coming from me brewing beer. I normally notice about when I brew beer, and they're talking about breaking up the long sugar molecules. You need a certain types of grains that have certain kind of diastatic power to break up the glucose and break up the other molecules along complicated chains. So how would that fit into this right here?
Well, what we're going to do, we will talk about how many of the molecules that we first acquire for energy are actually chains of glucose. They're molecules that are glucoses chained together to form a longer molecule. And really, one of the most famous ones is the one that you would find in this bun. Okay, in this bun, there is a famous molecule. I'll write this down because it's, you know, you asked the question, so I'm going to go ahead and here it is. The point is here is that the molecule that's in the bun is a molecule called amylose. And amylose is often referred to, its common name is table starch. And that's because it is found in bread, tortillas, pasta, okay? And it is called amylose, okay? And I mean, I'll tell you that, okay, so bread, tortillas, pasta, that's what they call a table starch, okay? It is built of hundreds of glucose molecules strung together. Plants do it. Amylose is a plant starch, right? We got it in bread, tortillas, pasta. Hundreds of glucose molecules strung together. So honestly, Kendall, this is like the molecules that you start with in grains that are long chains of glucose that are, in order for them to be useful for fermentation, they need to be broken down into shorter chains. Here's it, when it comes to amylose, which is possibly one of the sources of sugar that you would use in fermenting beer or wine or whatever. When it comes to amylose, there's an enzyme, and the enzyme is called amylase, okay? And amylase is a digestive enzyme, breaks amylose into many glucoses. Okay? It breaks amylose.
What killed? Isn't that what killed Kellogg?
Amylase?
Yeah, he died of supposedly the Kellogg, the cereal guy. He died of malnutrition. That's what he would overchew his food before it got to he believed in chewing food 100 times. So the slap of amylase in his mouth broke down the food too much. So when he hit his stomach, he had no nutrient left to feed the rest of his body. So supposedly he died of like malnutrition or whatever, or one of the symptoms that killed him.
Right. And I don't know anything about that. That's a great story. And I will look into it just because now I'm interested in it. There's an enzyme, as you just mentioned, Kendall. It's called salivary amylase. It is in our saliva. It breaks down amylose right in our mouth. So, for what it's worth, when you are chewing a bun like on a cheeseburger, it gets broken down into your mouth and you get a tiny sugar rush right away within seconds. I mean, I'm going to say that this is one of the reasons why eating bread is so satisfying, because most breads, when you're chewing them in your mouth, you're actually breaking them down. I never chew 100 times. You're breaking them down into glucoses, and some of those glucose go right into your bloodstream around from in your mouth. And you get a tiny little rush right away. If you are really starving, you eat some bread, you're going to get a sugar rush, a little bit of a sugar rush right away. Okay, so I'm not sure what the Kellogg story is, but I got to look at and see what the actual story is there. Anyway, so I was just mentioning all this. So can I mention something else? I have to mention it. All right, that when you have the word ending that ends this way, OSE, you know what that always means? It means carbohydrate. Okay. The word ending ASE, it means enzyme, and enzymes, Okay, it means time. I'm going to post this. Oh, the word ending ose means carbohydrate, glucose, maltose, fructose, amylose, cellulose. All if it ends in ose, that's a dead giveaway that it's some kind of carbohydrate. We're going to talk about carbohydrates soon. If a word ends in ace, like amylase, peptidase, lipase, protease, it means it's an enzyme. And so if you don't know what an enzyme is, here it is. Enzyme is a protein catalyst that coordinates and organizes a chemical reaction. Without enzymes, the chemicals reactions in our body would not happen at the right place and the right time. It would not. So, bottom line is that here's some good vocabulary that you want to put in your notes. Okay, now let me go back to here. And I mean, I'm happy to have questions and observations for sure. I'm gonna start here with this current slide, and I'm going to go down here. Okay. I'm still talking about number 2. All living things must acquire specific materials, that's atoms, molecules, and energy to maintain their organization. So here is a molecule in which I have drawn the structural formula of it as accurately as I could. Now take a look. This has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 carbons. That's what the oct means. This is like octet or octopus. It means 8. So there's 8 carbon. Now notice every carbon has 4 bonds. 1, 2, 3, 4. In the case of this carbon, one of the bonds is to another carbon. But the other 3 bonds, 1, 2, 3, are to hydrogens. In fact, this molecule is a molecule that is called a hydrocarbon. And it is called octane. Okay, so its molecular formula, well, you can count it. 8 carbons and 18 hydrogens. That's 8 plus 8 is 16, 18. It's got 18 hydrogens. Its molecular formula. Remember, the molecular formula is the formula that tells you what elements are in the molecule and how many there are. This molecule has carbons and hydrogen, and that's all it has. That's why it's called a hydrocarbon. Its molecular formula is C8H18. That's what we call its molecular formula. Okay. But what I've actually drawn here, and this is important, is that what I've actually drawn here is what's called the structural formula. And the structural formula is written, it looks a little bit like a picture of, it looks a little bit like a sort of 2-dimensional drawing of what the molecule looks like. Now, here's its molecular formula. Here's its structural formula. I started by drawing a chain of carbons. I made sure every carbon had 1, 2, 3, 4 bonds. In this carbon, 2 of these bonds go to other carbons, right? This carbon is bonded by a covalent bond to this carbon and a covalent bond to this carbon, but then it's bonded by a covalent bond to a hydrogen and to a hydrogen. This is a pretty famous hydrocarbon named octane. And like I said, the structural formula of octane is run like this. Now, look, this isn't a biological molecule, not in the traditional sense. It was biological at one point in time, but it's not. The structural formula of octane drawn like this. So why did I spend any time at all talking about octane? Well, maybe you know, but every week or two, I have to drive into a carbon chain dispensing station and pay, these days around $2 a gallon for a solution of carbon chains. And one of those is octane, a pretty famous fuel molecule. My car can break it apart and release lots of energy. Now, what does that mean? Well, I put octane and other anes, other hydrocarbons. Octane is maybe the most famous one. I put that in my car. My car can take that octane molecule, and it can rip it apart and release chemical bond energy. In fact, I should go back here and thanks for everybody's patience here. These PowerPoints are going to be really good for the next class that I teach. Thanks to everybody's patience here. Okay. Octane, pretty famous fuel molecule. My car can break it apart and release lots of chemical bond energy to do what? Well, this is what makes the internal combustion engine move, so that movement translated into wheels turning and the car. That chemical bond energy can be used to generate electricity, so I can run my lights, or I can run my radio, or I can charge my battery. That chemical bond energy can be used to generate light energy by powering the lights in the front of my car or inside my car, so I can see the inside of my car and I can see what's outside my car. That car can use that chemical bond energy to generate sound energy. And part of that sound energy is the whole. But another part of that chemical bond, that sound energy, is the radio that's playing or whatever. My car can break it apart and release lots of heat energy. I mean, so much heat energy. Wow, I jumped. So much heat energy that I have to have a whole system on my car just to take that energy away. Otherwise, it's going to melt the engine. Right? It's going to melt the engine. So I mentioned octane for that very reason. Look, octane is a molecule that you probably buy. You put it in your car. You put it in your car so that the energy in that octane molecule will be used it can be broken apart, and the chemical bond energy that's released can be used to do all the important things your car does. And maybe I've missed on this, but this is a long moving, generating electricity, generating light energy, generating sound energy, generating heat energy. And again, I'm sure there's something I'm not thinking about. So when we tear that molecule apart in our engine, energy is released, and our engine is designed to take that energy and use it, right? Well, what about cells? Well, I got to say, the story is very similar for cells. Cells take glucose, which is packed full of energy. They carefully break it apart, just like my car did. They carefully break it apart. They transfer the energy to ATP. My car doesn't do that. And then they distribute that ATP out to all of the four corners of the cell, because most cell machines that need to be used to move things around, to generate heat, to break molecules apart, to put molecules together, to maintain homeostasis, all of that stuff is going to require energy. The chemical bond energy from glucose is going to be used to do all those processes. It's more complicated inside of a cell by far, because you can just explode the gas in your gas tank and you're set. But in your cells, you can't really start exploding stuff. That's not really a good idea. You have to very carefully remove the energy from glucose, transfer it to an energy carrier molecule like ATP, and move it around in the cells. But the things that cells do, which includes movement, building chemical bonds, breaking chemical bonds, and a long list of other things that cells do, those things require energy. So the bottom line is that cells are just as dependent upon energy as your car is. And maybe your car is a little better off, because if my car runs out of energy completely and it dies, well, I can, go somewhere and get some energy, get some gasoline and put it in, and it's probably going to start my car up again. But if, my body dies, then, and it's just laying there on the floor, you can't get some Oreo cookies and stick them in my mouth and start, CPR, and I'll just bounce back to life. Once I'm dead, because I did not have enough energy, it's not going to be possible to bring me back. Cells are addicted to energy. We are born addicted to energy. Without energy, cells cannot do their jobs. And when cells stop doing their jobs, that's bad. That's really bad. Okay? So I'm going to go here now, but I would be very happy to try. Oh, I know one thing that's worth mentioning. In octane, I have to say it, where did octane get the energy it has? Right? Where did it get the energy it had? And I'm going to go back here and again play with this.
Are you talking about the addition of corn sugar?
I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't understand what you said.
Are you talking about when they started adding never mind, I'm thinking of ethanol. My bad. It's not
You're thinking of ethanol.
Yeah.
I'm writing a hint right here about where that energy came from. And the hint was this: they call octane the phosphor, and that's because fossilized. It is derived from fossil things. And ecosystems get buried and pressurized and heated, they turn into this thick tar called crude oil. And in that crude oil, there are multiple fossil fuels, and those fossil fuels, like octane, where did they get their original chemical bond energy? It was solar energy. So those ecosystems millions of years ago used solar energy to do photosynthesis, built plants, built the ecosystem. Then the ecosystem got buried and pressed and heated, and now it turns into this thick crude oil, which they suck out of the ground, and they distill it and extract airline fuel and kerosene and petroleum jelly and, oh my gosh, heating fuel and gasoline. They extract all of that. So it was originally actually solar energy too. I don't know, worth mentioning, I suppose. All right. So we've talked a lot about energy. Believe me, we're not going to completely leave the topic of energy, but here I am back to that delicious cheeseburger that this is a nice cheeseburger. I mean, I have to say, this is what the cheeseburger looks like when you see it on TV. And then you rush down to some place to buy it, and then you look at it, and it looks completely different. It looks all squashed and flat. I mean, look at that burger. That's a pretty looking one. Oh, sorry, I'm getting off track. All right, what's the other reason? So one of the reasons that we ate is because we were looking for energy in the form of fuel molecules like glucose, C6H12O6, okay? And we've talked a lot about energy to one degree or another. But the second reason is critical. We eat food like this because we need replacements, atoms, and molecules. We need to replace atoms and molecules. We constantly need to replace atoms and molecules. Why? Why do we need to replace atoms and molecules by eating food? And the answer is very straightforward. We are always losing them. We, as a process of life, we are all sort of falling apart. And as we fall apart, we lose critical atoms and molecules. If we could not replace those atoms and molecules, sooner or later, the deficit in those atoms and molecules would kill us, right? I mean, I've seen some horrific pictures of people, come out of concentration camps who were basically lived for long periods of time on like bread and water, and that was it. Very little protein, very little fat, and these people were shrunk down to pure skin and bones. They had digested their own muscles in order to keep from dying. So the second reason why we pick up food is because foods generally have molecules that are similar to ours, and we need to gather those molecules to replace lost molecules. So again, we're still on number 2. All living things must acquire. So how are organisms always losing atoms and molecules? Well, here's one of my favorite examples. Hair. Hair falls out. Hair is mostly made of a pretty famous protein called keratin. Proteins, not always, but often they end in IN, just like the word protein ends in IM. But keratin is a pretty complex protein. It has all of the sponge elements plus sulfur, phosphorus, oxygen, nitrogen, carbon, and hydrogen, the sponge elements. I mean, these elements represent about 99% of the elements in our body. But maybe you've never experienced hair falling out, but I'm sure you have, right? I'm sure you have. Hair is constantly falling out. You get your comb and you see it. You take a bath and you see it. So I got to ask, is hair a waste product or something else? I mean, are we losing hair because hair is like a waste product? And the answer is no. Hair is not a waste product. Hair is absolutely a protective structure. I mean, if you're a cat, and you recognize right away that their hair is super protective, super protective. I mean, my cats will touch me and accidentally cut me. It happens every day. And that's because, among cats, you can touch another cat with your claws, even your claws out, and you will barely hurt it. I mean, the layers of hair on most mammals, like cats, are very dense, and they are absolutely protective. I think that the hair we find on a human body, on the top of our heads, on the sides of our heads, in our pubic area, all of that hair has something to do with protection. So the point I'm trying to make is hair is not a waste product. No, hair is a valuable substance secreted by cells, packed full of important elements, and it is falling out all the time. You cannot prevent it, right? Now, what about skin cells? Here's another one. I often read that a component, not entirely, but a component of the dust we find in a human house is made of human skin cells. And so I got to show you. Here's a picture of the surface of the skin showing some human skin cells. And I don't know about you, but when I see human skin cells like this, You know what they remind me of? They remind me of potato chips. I don't know why. Am I hungry? They remind me of potato chips. I mean, look at this. Now, here's another view. Same thing. Surface of skin. These little crack. These are the cells on some of our skin, and they are constantly falling off. They're being constantly, so that there's lots of skin inside your pillow in the corner of your house. They're constantly being released. Well, again, one of the most common in human skin cells is keratin, complex protein, lots of elements in it. You lose a piece of time, you lose a skin cell or a mouth cell, you are losing essential elements of life. You're going to need to replace those. Otherwise, you will shrivel to, well, you'll shrivel up and fall apart. And is crazy about skin cells. Again, they remind me of potato chips. But what I think is worthwhile mentioning, because this is biology class, right, is that in our bed, in our couch, creatures that look a bit like this, they're called dust mites. And that's because they live in dust, they live in your bed, they live in your pillow, they live in your couch. And believe it or not, these dust mites like this, they eat human skin. They're called keratinocytes. Sorry, no. They're called, not keratinocytes. They're called, what is the word I'm looking for? Keratinivores. Let's put it that way. They're skin eaters. And so this shows one on human skin, but they're much, and you will find them on your skin, no doubt about it. But you're also going to find them in your couch, in your bed, in your pillow. And these things eat human skin. And then there are things that eat them, and there are things that eat them, and there are parasites. I mean, you can form a whole little ecological community in your couch where skin mites are kind of the herbivores. What do the skin mites eat? They eat these potato chippy cells that fall off. I mean, to these skin mites, you are a god. And when they look up from your couch, I don't even know if they have eyes, but they look up from your couch and they see your butt descending onto the couch, they think, oh my gosh, it is dinner time. This creature is going to rain down food upon us. And so they are super grateful, I'm sure. I mean, your skin cells fall into your couch and into your bed and form an entire little ecological community inside those areas where it is based on you providing them with skin cells to eat. And they rely on that. And like I said, it's kind of, it seems to me as if when you sit down at night, be a couch potato, guess what? You are shedding millions of couch potato chips. These things right here that represent skin, the surface of your skin. So you scratch yourself, you rub yourself. Now, what are these skin cells all about? They're there for protection. They're protective. They're designed to protect the delicate tissues below the epidermis of your skin. But they are constantly falling off. When they fall off, they take away essential elements with them. If you don't replace those essential elements, you're not going to be able to make skin. And your skin will get thin and it will tear and you'll get an infection, etc. Couch potato chips. Oh, the ones that I always think about, I especially think about these when I am brushing my teeth, right? Are mouth lining cells. There are cells that line your mouth that are similar to skin cells. They look, they don't look quite as potato chippy. They're sort of squishier and softer. But anytime you eat anything, you will scrape these mouth-lining cells off your mouth, and you will swallow them and digest them and eat them by the millions, no matter what you eat. So you know what this means, of course, just to be clear. I want to be clear here. What this means is there is no such thing as a vegetarian. No such thing as a vegetarian. No matter what you eat, even if all you eat is hummus and pita, you are always going to be eating a little bit of meat with your dinner. And I mean mouth cells. You will be swallowing them. So not only when you eat your totally vegan meal, you are also eating skin cells from your mouth and swallowing them. So you are technically not vegan because you're eating some animal flesh. And worse than that, we're all guilty of this. Since we're eating human cells when we eat, I guess we're also cannibals, because one of the cells we definitely consume, eat, digest, kill, etc., are the cells that line our mouth.
Also, too, that most most vegans eat probably more bugs than the average person does because of the amount of grain and flour and bugs that are kept in stuff like that, wheat, flour, chocolate, things like that. There's, I think, with chocolate, I think it's 6 parts per billion, or you're allowed to have like a certain number of insect larvae and flies and stuff in chocolate and things like that.
And that may be true, no doubt about it. But I'm saying that whenever you eat anything, you are consuming living human skin cells. Now, I mentioned brushing my teeth. Imagine when you're brushing teeth and you're brushing your mouth, how many of these cells you must scrape off and spit out. So you're spitting them in the sink by the millions. Now, again, why am I talking about this? Because I'm trying to convince you that we must acquire brand new elements in order to replenish the elements that we are constantly losing. It's impossible not to lose them. Your skin will flake off, your hair will fall out. I mean, when you exhale, you're exhaling carbon dioxide, right? When we sweat, we're releasing atoms and molecules. I mean, maybe we're just releasing water, right? We're secreting water. But hey, if you live in the desert and water is critical and you're sweating it out, that could be what contributes to your dehydration, no doubt about it. My point is, look, you can't avoid losing molecules, and that explains the second part of this. We have to constantly eat foods like this to replace these atoms and molecules. Well, I'm going to say in a cheeseburger like this burger is made of mostly protein that's very similar to human proteins. The bun has glucose in it for sure. The cheese has things that are similar to human proteins, the proteins in the rest of this, but then there's starches. I mean, there's 4 major organic molecules that I will sooner or later I will sooner or later tell you what the names of these are. Carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleotides. These are the 4 main organic molecules of life, and this cheeseburger has all 4 of those main types of molecules in it. Some of them are very similar to ours. The beef protein, our body's going to take that down and break it into little building blocks called amino acids. It's going to build human protein out of them. Doesn't have to modify them at all. So when you reach for something like a burger, you are absolutely reaching for a cluster of molecules that are similar, and if they're not similar, they're very useful to a body like ours, which constantly needs to replace these elements. Okay. All right. Look, this is where I want to pick it up tomorrow. I'll finish the characteristics of life tomorrow, but this is where I want to pick it up tomorrow. I'm gonna give myself a note. This is slide. Oh, this is the last slide in this part. Okay. So I need to start at 25 tomorrow, and I will have fed the other in by that time too, okay? So before I leave the characteristics of living things, can I answer any questions about it? I would be so happy to answer questions about it.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could like explain enzymes a little more. Can you give like an example?
Well, the example, the one example I gave here. So I want to be as clear as I can. An enzyme is a protein molecule manufactured by your body, right? It's manufactured by your body, and its entire purpose is to coordinate chemical reactions, all right? It's to coordinate chemical reactions. There are thousands of chemical reactions that are essential for thousands.
So like kind of like stomach acid?
Well, stomach. Well, now the thing, when it comes to the stomach, the cells that line the stomach, they basically make three different things. They make mucus, which lines and protects the stomach. It's a protein, and we'll talk about mucus.
Okay.
They make acid. That's hydrochloric acid, a very strong acid, really. They make hydrochloric acid that is designed to make the pH of the stomach low. And then they make an enzyme called pepsin. And pepsin is a protein digesting enzyme. So I'll mention that one, right? So there's this enzyme called pepsin, and it is a protein. Now this means I'm going to rephrase it. It digests protein stomach. Okay, so that's a great example of an enzyme. Let me give you another one. Well, I mentioned amylase. That's the one that's made by our cell that breaks down glucose in your mouth into glucose that can be absorbed right into your blood. And again, that's why I said I think bread can be pretty satisfying. Okay, but then, so that's in your mouth, salivary amylase. Pepsin is in your stomach, and its job is to digest proteins. I'll mention another one that's in the digestive enzyme. It's called intestinal lipase. Intestinal lipase digests lipids, and lipids is a generalized term for fats. So here's the thing. There are thousands of different enzymes found throughout your body. There are thousands of enzymes in every cell, and the enzymes themselves, and we're going to talk about enzymes. Enzymes are a kind of protein that coordinates a chemical reaction. So all the ones I've talked about so far, let's just say every one I've talked is a digestive enzyme. So what it's doing is it's taking something complex and it's breaking it apart. But there are just as many enzymes that take things that are simple and bind them together. So it's a really famous enzyme. All right, it's called DNA polymerase.
Right.
DNA polymerase. This is the enzyme that builds the DNA molecule. Every cell in our body has DNA polymerase. Now, how do I recognize it's an enzyme? Remember this? ASE. Now, pepsin's an exception to the rule. Most enzymes, though not every enzyme, ASE comes that it identifies it as an enzyme. That helps.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Good. And your question: what happens if cells burn our mouth? When you burn your mouth, I mean, if you've eaten something that's way too hot, it's burned your mouth, then that's really going to kill some cells and cause damage and blisters. And so cells will slough off and fall off and be lost. What's great, though, about the lining of your mouth is that it loses so many cells that the process of replacing lost cells is pretty well established there. So mouth wounds actually generally heal pretty fast because the cells that replace those malforming cells are really in the mouth. And for what it's worth, this outer layer of my skin, this layer right here is called the epidermis, right? And the epidermis is about 30 cells thick or so. And at the base of that, there's a set of cells whose job it is to produce twice a day to make new skin cells. So those cells of the stratum germinative, they are the mother cells that make brand new epidermal cells. And those epidermal cells, they start out when they're born, and they get pushed up and pushed up and pushed up until they eventually dry and flake off. And there's that constant process. Those cells that are at the base of the epidermis will reproduce about a day to make about 30 layers of cells. Now, with epidermis, they also have a layer of keratin. Remember good old keratin? The cells on the very surface are filled with keratin, an essential protein. I mean, again, I used to have cells here on the head that actually made hair, kind of like this. But those cells they failed to make hair, or they don't make enough hair, right? But they did. There was a time when they did. So there's cells that manufacture hair. Hair, again, isn't a waste product. It is a carefully manufactured substance for protection that is carefully manufactured by cells. And when we start talking about cell physiology, which we'll talk about soon, we're going to start talking about the jobs that cells do. So I hope that answered some questions. Now, here's where I want to go next. Over here, I want to go here. Okay, and look, I'm not saying that this PowerPoint is entirely self-explanatory. I don't think it is, but this is a PowerPoint I've been working on for years, and it's mostly self-explanatory. So in your particular case, you're going to be looking at these PowerPoints as if we're reading a chapter in a book, and the material that's in them is critical information for the class. Okay, just to be clear, but there are some PowerPoints that require more explanation than others. This basic chemistry PowerPoint, and it's just the first chemistry PowerPoint. I've got 5 of them that I need to put the finishing touches on and post them. This one's posted as Basic Chemistry 1. All right, so I just like to spend a few minutes looking at this. However, if you are reading the lab and you are looking at this PowerPoint and you're attending the class and all that, then you're going to get very basic chemistry down. I mean, I know they recommend for Bio 156, they recommend that people take basic chemistry, but I don't think you really need to, because I want to teach chemistry from the biological perspective. But look, we have to understand basic chemistry. We cannot not do it, okay? Why would you as a biologist be interested in chemistry? And the answer really is right here, right? All biological processes depend on chemical reactions, and they're shaped by the laws of chemistry. Biological creatures cannot disobey the chemical laws. Everything, living and non-living, is composed of matter. Remember the definition of matter? Matter is anything that occupies space and has mass. It is made of atoms. So all matter is composed of elements, and an element is a specific type of atom. So the bottom line is if you have a question like, why do biologists need to know about atoms? Why do biologists need to know about molecules? The answer is pretty straightforward. Because living things are built of atoms and molecules. And some of the properties of life are absolutely chemical properties. They're related to our chemistry. So, you can't really understand biology without understanding some basic chemistry, right? And so there's actually a thought question that says, why do biologists need to know about living things? Well, I would say it's simple, because living things are made of chemicals. That's why. They're built of chemicals. And these chemicals have to obey certain kind of chemical laws. And that means that these biological creatures are going to be, their very function is going to be related to chemical processes. Okay? You sort of already know this because I said that when we talked about the organization of living things, where did I start? I started with atoms, and then I went to molecules, and then I went to organelles, which seem more living, and then I went to cells. But I started out with atoms and molecules, and that's why we're going back here today. So remember that when we talk about atoms, we're talking about a sort of generic thing like car. I say, look, out in the parking lot, there's 300 different cars. Well, everybody can understand what I mean, but really, is there a single car out in the parking lot that is a generic car? No. Every car out there has a specific name and specific characteristics that go with it. Well, elements are the basic substance of matter. They are specific atoms, and each atom is unique. You know, I've changed my opinion on this. I apologize. I actually published something that said slightly different. I've taken some time and looked at the periodic table of the elements, so sorry, I'm changing this. It says there's 88 naturally occurring elements, okay? That's what I'm now convinced is the better answer to that. Now look, take a look at this list. This is similar to a list I showed you. Here's oxygen. Its international chemical symbol is O. Its weight percentage in the body is about 65%. Carbon, 18. Now these numbers are slightly different. These are based on weight than the ones I showed you in the element of life chart, which is based on atomic numbers, how many atoms are there. But notice that still, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen make up, by weight, about 96.3% of the body. Then, some of the other important elements like calcium and phosphorus and potassium and sulfur and sodium and chlorine and all that, you add that up, you've got 1.5, 2.5, 2.9, 3.2, 3.5, 3.7, 3.8, and you add all this together and you get to about 100%. But you know what? That's oversimplifying a little bit because there are a bunch of trace elements like boron, chromium, cobalt, copper, fluorine, iodine. Even though these things are trace elements, they are still critically important. So here's just some pictures of elements. That's all. Life requires about 24 elements to make proteins, to make sugars, to make fats, to make nucleotide molecules, the DNA, RNA, and ATP. 4 elements little item there. This question, this acronym right here, CHON, C-H-O-N. Well, you can probably C for carbon, H for hydrogen, O for oxygen, N for nitrogen. CHON is used to remember the 4 most common elements in living things. Now look, what is one very common form of oxygen and hydrogen in the body? What's one really common molecule in the body that contains only hydrogen and oxygen? Water, thank you, you bet. And again, depending on how you look at it, whether you look at numbers of molecules or weight, still tends to come down to the fact that something like about 65% of body weight is made of water. Water is certainly, if it's not the most common molecule in the body, it's tied for most common molecule in the body. And I will tell you again that water is one of the 5 major biomolecules. The other 4 don't do: carbohydrates, lipids, protein, and nucleotides. So I tend to, for what it's worth, this is a way that this is often written: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur. But frankly, I like the word sponge. Sponge stands for the same thing: sulfur, phosphorus, oxygen, nitrogen, carbon, and hydrogen. Okay. Of course, there's all these other elements: iron and calcium and potassium and iodine. Oh my gosh, there's a long list. 24, like I said, 24 elements that represent the elements that you use to build a human body. And sponge, I have to tell you, one of the reasons I like sponge so much, and I can't show it to you, it's locked on my desk at school, but there's a kind of Mexican cookie, really tasty Mexican cookie called a sponge cookie. And this is where I break out my sponge cookies and describe these delicious Mexican cookies. But when you get a chance, you can go to a place where they might sell Mexican pastries like this, like Food City or something. You'll find these cookies called sponge cookies that maybe when you eat them, it'll remind you of sulfur, phosphorus, oxygen, nitrogen, carbon, hydrogen. But there's other elements needed in small amounts. Some element iron is needed for energy, for carrying oxygen in the blood. Calcium is needed in bones and for muscle contraction. Sodium, potassium are involved in nerve signaling and muscle contractions too. A goiter, maybe you've heard of this. A goiter is a swelling of the thyroid gland resulting from a deficiency of the element iodine. If you don't have enough iodine, it can cause some of the cells in your thyroid gland, which is normally, you don't even see it. Normally your thyroid gland is kind of thin and it's pressed in front of your throat here. But in this poor woman, it has swollen up like this. And the reason is because she's doesn't have enough of a trace element called iodine that's used to make thyroid hormones. Okay. So you know this already. Elements are represented by their chemical symbols, right? Like carbon is represented by a capital C. Sometimes it's the first letter of the name, like hydrogen, nitrogen, but sometimes it's not, like sodium. This the other day is actually, they already had an S. They decided they weren't going to use it, so they used its Latin name, which is natrium. Iron, I think its Latin name is therium, and potassium, it's kalium. So sometimes in the list of elements, it's really crystal clear, you know, like capital C stands for carbon, but sometimes capital F, lowercase e stands for iron. Okay? Now, all matter is made of atoms, and atoms really, these are the building blocks of matter. The atoms are made of 3 smaller types of particles. Those small subatomic particles are called protons, neutrons, electrons. In this model right here, I'm going to just count first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I see 10 electrons in this picture. And so I'm going to guess that there's probably 10 protons, but I'm not going to be able to see them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This area of the atom is called the atomic nucleus. And the atomic nucleus refers to the sort of central organizing part of an atom. And it is made of protons and neutrons. So let's just say the blue balls here are protons that have a positive charge, and the red ones are neutrons that are neutral and don't have a charge. But then orbiting around it, like planets around the sun, are the little negatively charged electrons. So protons have a positive charge, neutrons have no charge, electrons have a negative charge. Usually, but not always, I'll tell you some examples. The number of electrons is equal to the number of protons. If you count that there's 10 protons, you can kind of guess approximately or exactly how many electrons there will be. Okay? Now, when the number of electrons, which are negatively charged, is equal to the number of protons, then the atom doesn't have a charge. It's not a charged atom. We will talk about atoms that do not have equal numbers of electrons and protons, and therefore they are charged. Okay? So this particular atom, I guess, can I count these? I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I see 7 electrons, and for what it's worth, in the atomic nucleus, I see 7 protons, but I don't see any neutrons, and there's usually, almost always, there's protons and neutrons. So when we look at, what we call the planetary model of the atom, we see the atomic nucleus here, right? It's the atomic nucleus, sorry. Right? It's the atomic nucleus. It's not the nucleus of a cell. That's a completely different thing. The word nucleus is kind of a word that means the organizing center of something, right? The nucleus is the organizing center of something. And so this atomic nucleus that has positively charged protons and negatively charged neutrons, and neutrally charged neutrons. Neutrons are neutral, right? They don't have a charge. This is the atomic nucleus. Now, these electrons out here are in orbit around the atomic nucleus. And that's why this is called the planetary model of the atom. Because in a certain sense, it reminds you of the solar system. Here's the sun, and orbiting around the sun, there's Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, and maybe more, orbiting around the sun. You kind of, it's interesting when you look at an atom like this, you ask the question, well, why are negatively charged electrons orbiting around the positively charged nucleus? Well, I chose my words carefully. Negatively charged things are attracted to positively charged things. It's one of the laws of physics. It's called the physics law of attraction. Let me chat that, if you don't mind. Okay, this is called the physics law of attraction. Let's put this in your notes. Okay. Here's what it says. Oppositely charged things are attracted together. Positive to negative, and same charged things are repelled. Are repelled by each other. Oh, so two negatives, they're going to be repelled by each other. Two positives are going to be repelled from each other. Okay, repelled means that they are another. I'm trying to think of another good synonym for that. They are, I guess, repelled is the best word that my 85-degree brain can think of now. I'm sure I'll come up with some other. But please write down this physics law of attraction because it's critical for understanding some of the basic concepts of how we put an atom together. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 protons here. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I said that wrong. Sorry. I must be getting tired, right? These are electrons, and they are negatively charged. These are protons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 protons. 6 protons means 6 positive charges. 6 electrons are going to be attracted into orbit around them. Now, these other things, these red things, as you can see, those are neutrons. Neutrons don't have a charge. So they're not going to attract electrons or repel electrons or anything like that. So just a couple of different planetary models. But when I think about the planetary model, I have to ask, why are electrons in orbit around the atomic nucleus? Because the atomic nucleus is always positively charged. Electrons are negative charged. The physics law of attraction says negative and positive charges are going to be attracted together. But it does make me want to ask the question, why is the Earth, Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, all those, why are they orbiting around the sun? And probably there are people thinking, I'll tell you. It's because the planets are attracted to the sun. They're attracted to it. The sun is a huge, massive structure, and the little tiny planets are attracted to it. Now, I don't think they traditionally talk about negative and positive charges, but the Earth orbits around the sun because the Earth is attracted to the sun. The moon orbits around the Earth because the moon is attracted to the Earth. And electrons around because they are to the atomic nucleus. So it's important to realize that every element has a unique number of protons. If you find an atom that has one proton, that is hydrogen. It has to be hydrogen. If you have two protons, then you are helium. That's the only element you can be. Oh, 6 protons. See this one right here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 protons, 6 neutrons, 6 electrons. This right here must be carbon, because only carbon has an atomic number of 6. It has 6 protons in its atomic nucleus. This one over here, of course, we can't see everything. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 electrons. And it looks to me like we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 protons. That's all they're showing. So if it has 7 protons, it has to be nitrogen. It is absolutely nitrogen. If it has 8 protons and normally 8 electrons, then it's oxygen. And remember, for any given element, the number of protons in the atoms never changes. I mean, look, I want to tell you, there are some big, crazy elements like uranium where the number of protons can change. But when we're talking about the 24 elements of life, the number of protons in them will never change. They aren't going to break down into something different. So that number, the number of protons, is I know it's mentioned elsewhere, but I am going to go back here and I'm going to say that the number of protons is the atomic number of element and determines which element a particular atom is. This atomic number is what's the atomic number for hydrogen is 1. The atomic number for helium is 2. The atomic number for carbon, is 6. The atomic number for nitrogen is 7. The atomic number for oxygen is 8. Okay. So that I should have put it there and I didn't. So when we talk about an element, we'll talk about its atomic number, how many protons it has. Then we'll also talk about its atomic weight. And when we have to think about atomic weights, well, we have to fall back on an old chemical principle, which says this. Protons and neutrons weigh 1 atomic mass unit each. Okay, an atomic mass unit is a number that is been assigned to this element. Here's what early chemists discovered. They could not weigh a proton. They could not weigh a neutron, okay? But they did have some pretty good evidence that protons and neutrons weighed about the same. And so they said, look, just for the organizational purposes, let's do this. Let's say that a proton weighs 1 atomic mass unit and a neutron weighs 1 atomic mass unit. So if you were looking here and you saw 2 protons and 2 neutrons, you would go, okay, the atomic mass is 1, 2, 3, 4. It weighs 1, 2, 3, 4 atomic mass units, okay? So, but what about electrons? Well, electrons are so light in mass, they don't contribute to the weight of an atom. I mean, electrons weigh about 1/2000th of an atomic mass unit, so they never really count them. You know, what's for what worth, we now know what the actual weight of a proton is, and it is 1.7 yoctograms. So it's 1.7 times 10 to the negative 24th gram, which is 0.000. I'm not even, it's many, many zeros, 23 zeros and a 1. So they actually know what the weight is now, 1.7 yoctograms. I hope I'm not getting my yocta and yottagrams mixed up. I hope not. But the bottom line is that they didn't change anything. For purposes, they decided a proton weighs 1 and neutron weighs 1. So if you have 20 protons and 15 neutrons, the weight of that atom, its atomic mass, is 20 plus 15 or 35. Okay? Now again, protons and neutrons, they are bonded together by some serious nuclear energy to form the atomic nucleus, and then the electrons orbit the nucleus very, very fast. Really, they orbit at close to the speed of light. The atomic number, like we just said here, is the number of protons in one atom of the element. All atoms of an element have the same number of protons and therefore have the same atomic number. The atomic mass is the total weight of an atom. It's made up of the protons and neutrons. So again, if it was carbon-12, which is one of the ones we just looked at, it has its atomic mass is 12, and that atomic mass is made of 6 protons, each weighing 1, plus 6 neutrons, each weighing 1. 6 times 1 plus 6 times 1 is 12. Its atomic mass is 12 for carbon-12, which is the most common form of carbon. And remember, electrons don't weigh anything well. Okay? So I did go backwards. Oh, I went forwards. Oh, okay. We need to look at this slide again. The mass numbers, that means the atomic mass. Well, hydrogen has 1 proton, no neutrons. Its atomic mass is 1. Helium, what's its atomic mass? 2 plus 2 equals 4. Oh, carbon-12, the one I just mentioned, it has 6 protons and 6 neutrons, and it has an atomic mass of 12. That's why it's called carbon-12. 7 protons and 7 neutrons, that's nitrogen. 8 and 7 plus 7 is 14. 8 plus 8, 8 protons and 8 neutrons, that's oxygen, and its atomic mass is 8 plus 8 or 16. And then when you look at these, how can you predict the number of electrons that are going to be in orbit? And the answer is right here, right? 1 proton means it's going to attract 1 electron. 2 protons mean it's going to attract 2 electrons. 6 protons mean it's going to attract 6 electrons. 1 positive charge has the ability to attract 1 negative charge. 2 positive charges attract 2 negative charges. Now, you heard me say this a minute ago, carbon-12. Well, here's the thing. It turns out that if you're a specific element like carbon, one thing that is completely and totally predictable about you is the number of protons you're going to have. It doesn't make any difference whether you're carbon 12, carbon 13, or carbon 14. Look at how many protons you have. 6, 6, 6. Because 6 is the atomic number for carbon. Any sample of carbon, every atom in it has 6 protons. Otherwise, it wouldn't be carbon. I mean, if accidentally carbon got an extra proton, then it would have 7 protons and it would not be carbon anymore. It would be nitrogen. If it accidentally gained 2 protons, it wouldn't be carbon anymore. It would be oxygen. But the number of neutrons can actually vary from one atom to another in a sample of carbon. So the most famous and the most common kind of carbon is called carbon 12 because it has 6 protons, 6 neutrons, 6 and 6s, 12 atomic mass units. Well, because it has 6 protons, it's very likely to have 6 electrons too. Though there are cases where that's not true. Now, what if you had a form of carbon, but instead of having 6 neutrons, it had 7 neutrons? That situation does exist, but now it's going to weigh 6 plus 7, not 6 plus 6. It's not going to be carbon 12. 6 plus 6 is 12. It's actually going to be carbon 13. 6 plus 7 adds up to be 13. And it's even possible for a form of carbon to have 6 protons, of course. If it wouldn't be carbon if it didn't have 6, and 8 neutrons. So its total atomic mass is 6 plus 8, or 14. Now notice the same number of electrons. 6 protons means 6 electrons. 6 protons means 6 electrons. 6 protons means 6 electrons. So an isotope, when you talk about isotopes, you're talking about how atoms can actually differ a little bit based on how many neutrons they have. Does having those extra neutrons affect their fundamental properties? No, it doesn't. They can still do chemical bonding, et cetera, et cetera. It might make them a little bit radioactive, and that could be useful because if an isotope is radioactive, you can use it sort of like a biological spy. You can use it in nuclear medicine. Some isotopes emit radiation. They just have too many neutrons. These radioisotopes can be good diagnostic tools in medicine. But, your body can't tell whether it's carbon 12 or carbon 13 or carbon 14. It just deals with it the way it is. But if you've got the right equipment, you can detect that carbon 12 is not radioactive, but carbon 13 and carbon 14 are slightly radioactive. And that could be very useful because you could put those into a body and then you could look and see where the radiation is emitted and know where that particular atom went. You can trace atoms in the body by introducing atoms that way. Of course, radioactivity that's released by radioisotopes is harmful. Very small doses are used in nuclear medicine. Radioactive elements can throw out radioactive particles that can break chemical bonds and cause unusual bonds to form. I mean, why is this harmful? Well, because chemical bonds that create our bodies and cells, they have to have a certain structural formula. And if you start breaking the bonds apart, bad things can happen. Radioactivity damages many molecules in the body, especially DNA, and that's bad because DNA is super important in copying cells and allowing cellular reproduction to occur and even running cells. DNA is a recipe book. That's what it is. It's a recipe book for proteins. And if you damage DNA, you can affect its ability to make essential proteins that you got to have. So again, we've already sort of said this, electrons orbit the nucleus. They are found at specific distances. It can form energy levels, electron shells. Atoms can have 1, 2, or more electron shells. These are like the orbits that the planets have around the sun, for example. Each shell, excuse me, not cell, can hold only a certain number of electrons. And the number of electrons in the outer shell really determines the chemical properties of an atom to a very large degree. That shell is sometimes called the valence shell because it's like the shell that is exposed to the world and affects how that atom will behave. Okay, we're getting overwhelmed by chemistry. I know. I'm sure that you, just like I am, getting kind of tired. I think I'm going to stop here and come back to the periodic table of the elements next time. Okay, that's slide number 24. And you know what? I'm not very far away from the end of this. So that means I need to get chemistry 2 placed up there too. So chem, slide 24, characteristics of life, slide 25. Oh, what a day. I apologize for getting started late. Look, don't stress out about that atoms and molecules lab. We've got to do that in its own time, and doing that involves me being able to transmit certain information to you. But if you had it, if you haven't gotten the equipment for it, that is gummy bears, marshmallows, whatever it's going to take to build some molecules, go ahead and do it. Now, if you want to start working your way through that molecule, the atoms and molecules lab, that would be fine. But I'm not going to put a due date on it yet because I don't really feel like we're ready to go and actually deal with it. So what I'm going to do when we're done in a few minutes is I'm going to do what I said. I'm going to post the key to quiz 2. Then I'm going to put the finishing touches on quiz 3 and post that tomorrow. I'm going to look at the exam that I'm developing and figure out whether to actually make that live on Wednesday or on Thursday. Okay, but we're going to do that first exam this week one time or another, and it'll give you something to do over the weekend as you are quarantined. So it's going to be, this exam is going to be open note, open book. I apologize, but I don't know how to not do open. I mean, look, if you post an exam or quiz and you tell, well, I don't know, it's hard to expect people to have an honor system and go, look, this is an honor system. You can't consult anything when you do this quiz. Well, my unfortunate experience is that when you give people, long time to do something so that they do well, you automatically sort of set the stage for people to think about, Google things, ask things, etc. So they haven't figured out how to proctor exams virtually yet. They have not, really. There are some ways that people are using, but in terms of actually proctoring an exam, most everybody, as far as I know, is basically either using an honor system, which is nice, or making things open note, open book. And until I figure out a better way to proctor, I'm going to make the exam just like the quizzes, open note, open book. You will have. Yes, go ahead.
Oh no, I just said thank you.
Oh, well, in the long run, that is going to be good. People are going to get probably better grades maybe than they would have if I was over you doing your exam in a classroom. But you know what? I just don't know how else to handle it. So that's the way I'm going to handle it.
There are some people asking you questions in the chat room.
Oh, they are good. Good. Thank you. I'm going to exit this then. I think I'm done with this. Thank you so much for telling me that. So, the question was, wondering if we can go over questions 7 and 3 from the Alka-Seltzer lab. Okay, I'm happy to. Let me think about that for a second. I'm trying to see if I remember what those questions are, but I'm going to find this. Don't worry. Thanks for asking questions. I really appreciate it. I really do. And thanks for making me aware of the questions that were there. This room that I'm in right now is not, it is hot. It's really hot. I mean, I think it was 80. It's generally about 85. I feel like the brain is. I think I might need to go and buy myself some little portable cooler to put in this room. I've got a little fan over here, but I'm telling you, I feel like my brain is a little overloaded. But okay, we go. Oh my gosh. I know that it is here, and I guess I'm just missing it. I know there would probably be better ways to find this. Atoms and molecules. Come on, where is it? It's here somewhere. Oh, DNA relatedness. Sorry, give me a second. I'm going to find it. I did not mean to open that. All right, so here's the scientific method. I'm going to go down to question number 3. Oh, well, question number 3 was something that I assigned this before we even touched Alka-Seltzer. I was saying, look, I want you to look at this equipment list up here and look at the research question and just write a quick experiment that you might do. That's all. So this was before we started worrying about variables and those kinds of things. I just said, look, here's a research question. Will Alka-Seltzer dissolve more quickly in warm water than cold water? And look at the equipment list that you have and generate in a couple, 2 or 3 sentences, an experiment that you might do. Now that we already know what the experiment is like, you can really sort of go from there. Okay, and then question number 7 is this. This question number 7 is where you are going to explain in your own words exactly what you did. All right, and what you want to do here is you want to explain how you did your Alka-Seltzer experiment in such a clear way that I could repeat it. So you must start by saying, number 1, gather 2 Alka-Seltzer tablets, 2 identical clear containers, a measuring cup that has milliliters, and a timer of some kind, okay? Then step number 2 would be refrigerate tap water for 1 hour to get cold water, and run tap water for 5 minutes to get hot water. Then carefully measure 120 mils of cold water into a clear plastic container, 120 mils of hot water into. You see what I'm saying? Did that answer the question? What you're basically doing in the first case is this is a little experiment you generated before we even really talked about that. Then this is when you are going to tell me exactly what you did as carefully and precisely as possible. No idea why beer is underlined here. It's not a word, one word, is it? No. Very clearly, maybe that's what. Let's see if that helps. Would it? Be sure to make this protocol very clear. Oh, I don't like that very clearly. I like very clear. All right. So I hope that answered the questions. You're writing your experimental design. Okay. So let me go back to the chat because there was another question. And bullet points is fine. Bullet points is fine. No, and you could write it in bullet points, no doubt about it. Okay. And then this question, what does the Atoms and Molecules Lab do? I don't know. I mean, we'll talk in more detail about the Atoms and Molecules Lab tomorrow when we're further along in chemistry, and maybe I'll even build some silly molecules here. Okay. But you can start looking at it, reading, thinking about working, getting the equipment for it, and then we'll make it due probably early next week. But we're not. I don't feel like we're quite ready to go with it yet. Maybe that's me. But, all right. And thanks whoever pointed it out to me that there were chats going there. Because again, when I'm looking at a PowerPoint, I can't even see that.
I don't even tell the school.
Okay, I'm done unless somebody has a question. Hey, thanks for hanging in there today. Very long PowerPoints, etc. You know, I wish that it didn't quite have to be like this, but I actually don't know how to deliver the content I need to deliver without spending a significant amount of time every class period talking about it, answering questions about it, writing notes about it, etc. I simply don't know how to provide that material elsewhere. I mean, I guess I could, you know, try to find a movie on YouTube, but hey, you know, we need to focus on the essential elements of Biology 156. Okay. Hey, thank you everybody for being here. Turn things in if they're not turned in. I'll get more grading done. And really, one of the very first things I'm going to do is figure out why the grades aren't appearing. I'm going to do my best to do that. Okay.
Thank
See you
you.
tomorrow, 1:15. Have a great night.